Before you start, by the way, back in the green room, do you know that Ned Ryan's dad is Jim Ryan, the legendary? I did not know that, and he actually called his dad, and I had a conversation with Jim Ryan, so I can leave now. Nicest guy.
And the best part is, I took the phone afterwards and said, hey, forgot to tell you I'm going to be on The Specialist. He goes, yeah, I've got something else going on.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
He's going for a run? He was being sarcastic.
Yeah.
Well, my dad's watching. So my dad's always watching. Hey, Dad. So what do you think? A different tone from President Trump. Do you think that that's warranted? Do you think this means something? What were your thoughts on today?
No, I mean, again, different tone, very strong tone. I think it needs to be reminded we can eliminate you in 15 minutes. And we have the ability, we have the capability. I think what brought the UN Council, Security Council to the table was Trump's credible use of force. Said, I have it, I will use it, come to the table, pass it unanimously, the sanctions. Although with today's, breaking news with Washington Post, and now they have the ability to launch a nuclear weapon into the United States, I think obviously the rhetoric just went up this afternoon. I think he's willing and capable, and there are plans being made to deal with this in a very forceful way.
Terry, I think the issue is, of course, that along with destroying them, there's a lot of innocent lives that would be destroyed. It's a hostage situation, which is what makes it more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, can we at least as a country, as a society, realize this is what happens when you placate enemies? I mean, we've been going this way for a long time. This has been going on for decades, right? And we knew he'd always push the boundaries. He'd always push the boundaries. And now he's at this point. The problem with Korea, North Korea, and South Korea is, you're right. I think the nuclear stuff is a fear, legitimately so. But the other big problem is North Korea unleashing a lot of conventional stuff right into South Korea before we can actually help them. There's going to be a lot of people. It would be really ugly and nasty if that happens. But what do we do?
What's the alternative?
Right. At this point, this is what happens when you let an enemy get worse and worse. And now he's like, okay.
The time's not on our side. The longer we wait, it's going to be worse in 1 year. It's going to be worse in 6 years.
Right, it doesn't get better.
Every previous administration was kicking the can down the road. Starting with Clinton, then to Bush, then to Obama, now to Trump. And Trump finally has to confront this and say, we can no longer kick the can down the road.
I think the timeline is our problem, exactly to your point.
It's a very short one.
We almost have no timeline to the point where now all of our options, Kat, are bad options. And that is an unspeakable truth that nobody wants to deal with the consequences of civilian casualties. My God, nobody wants that. But again, what are all our alternatives in this day? I mean, it's horrible.
Well, of course, there are no good options. That's true. But also, Brian, as you know, Kim Jong-un knows that doing anything to us is literally the same as him committing suicide. He's committing suicide by doing anything like that.
It destroys everything, but he's enjoying the attention in the short term. But let's just think about, I don't think to the defense of Clinton, to the defense of Bush and Obama, and even today, if you think about it step by step, it kind of makes sense. This is how duped we were. Bill Clinton said one of my big regrets was not finishing off the North Korean deal. They were ready to give up their nukes, and I was just out of time as a president, and now the next president's going to come in and get all the credit. That's how close he thought we were to getting them denuclearized and things getting calm in that peninsula.
Well, and the North Korean government, such as it is really nothing more than it's a cartel. It's a crime. It's a crime. It's a crime syndicate.
Open up that cover on that country. It's going to be like the killing fields. These going to be people starved to death. They're going to say, how could the world have let this happen?
This is also why North Korea, on another level too, is not a long-term threat because they can't even feed their people. And it's the same way we defeated the Soviets. Is we didn't end up bombing them. We just outspent them. We outspent them. We out military hardwared them. We outdid them in everything. There's no depth to North Korea's resources. There really isn't. It's just the military.
The thing I was going to say, I mean, before the breaking news this afternoon from Washington Post, the sanctions were going to cut $1 billion in their export revenue out of $3 billion total, and would severely limit their abilities moving forward to actually build out their capabilities. But again, Ebony, I think the timeline's gotten much shorter, and just talking with military friends, again, the options that you're looking at are either real bloodshed on the Korean Peninsula or, even worse, a nuclear missile striking continental U.S. Neither are great options.
No. Horrible, both horrible options.
Certainly not. All right, well, Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, is pressing the case that tough new UN sanctions against North Korea could be enough to alter Kim Jong-un's behavior.
What this does do is, this kicks him in the gut. This goes right after the hard currency. He's going to feel it, and all that money that he's been using for his ballistic missile program, and he's not feeding his people, it just got reduced in a big way. What we are saying is, now the ball's in your court. Kim now has to decide, is he going to turn around and say, okay, the international community is telling me to stop, or is he going to have, you know, a temper tantrum?
Well, with much respect to Ambassador Haley there, and I think she's doing great work at the UN, she's speaking as if he's a rational, reasonable, sensible, logical person, and we know for a fact he's not. So I think he's liable to do anything.
Liable to do anything, whose first move was to wipe out all his enemies, including some of his relatives, and eventually poison his half-brother because he might be a threat to him. But it shows he's a planner and a plotter, and he's somewhat fearless, all right? He doesn't, you know, he doesn't diet well. He certainly doesn't exercise. But
nor does he get a good haircut.
Right.
That's an awful thing to say.
Right, yeah. How dare I take it that way?
His hair does look healthy, though.
Right.
I feel like he does get trims every 6 weeks.
But he does. You do get the sense that he is not crazy.
No, he's a survivor.
Well, crazy like a fox, right?
Right.
Like,
he's
not
a survivor.
Cunning and ruthless.
Yeah.
Well, and funny story, coming in today from the airport, my driver was a Korean guy, South Korean guy, and we started chatting. He was in the U.S. Army. He had worked with Special Forces. We had the best conversation, and I just said, he's from Seoul. His family's from Seoul. He hasn't been there for a long time. I said, can North Korea and South Korea be unified? Do you think? He goes, nope, never, as long as those guys are in power. So it's almost like you've got to rip them out root and branch.
Regime change.
Don't know how that,
So,
this is not an easy question, but.
Regime change, you talk about regime change.
The Chinese
How would
are gonna
that
have to be
happen? How would, exactly. We're not very good at doing those,
They
by the way.
eradicate the cartel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way that you do this. I mean, and first of all, the cartel's sole goal and purpose for the last however many decades is to get the capabilities, nuclear capabilities that they are getting and it appears now have, to be able to launch into the continental U.S. So they have achieved what the cartel set out to do, and you have to remove that in its entirety. The Chinese have to play a role in this if they want to, and this is the big question. Again, I know that China voted on the sanctions, and it was a unanimous vote. I think with the Chinese and their role in this moving forward is kind of a trust but verify. Again, I think people have forgotten. They voted for sanctions back in 2012, and then guess what they did? They looked the other way when a Chinese bank was laundering Iranian money into North Korea.
And that's my problem with sanctions. Again, a lot of people step to the table rhetorically and support them.
Right.
It's never worked the paper it's written on, almost impossible to actually enforce.
There was one time in which we brought them to their knees, and it was during the second term of the Bush administration when they got to the Macau Bank. This bank, for some reason, was the blood money that they were getting to sustain their regime.
Right.
And the minute we took that, they said, we need to talk, and we need to talk right away. And one of the things we did is remove them from the list of terror nations. And one of the things we did is we said we're going to have inspectors in there. And then it looked like they thoroughly duped the administration. Condoleezza Rice ran out of time.
Yeah.
And we looked back to Chris Hill and company, and we said, what the heck happened? It wasn't that they were lazy. And then the Obama administration comes in and says, I have an idea, strategic patience. That clearly put a time bomb. It pulled the pin, if I can use your analogy, on a grenade and handed it to Donald Trump. Someone's going to blame Donald Trump for this, I'm sure.
No matter what, it's going to fall on the current president. And to your point about China, I always said when you're talking about North Korea in general, when you see them over these years, when you've seen them on the news, just substitute the word China, because North Korea is kind of the golem that China has created willingly and with malice aforethought. And I think at some point, I always called them a pit bull.
Yep.
And it's a pit bull that they always were able to maintain some control over, and they would bring that pit bull out into the yard when people were bugging them or they want to get some attention. But now it's almost like at some point, what are you going to do with this pit bull? You're going to put it down?
Right. Do they still control the pit bull?
Yeah.
And that's the question. If China, I think it's going to get to the point, does China feel that it can still control its pit bull? And if it can't, obviously they don't want to have North Korea. They don't want
nuclear activity in
and
that
they don't
part
want
of
North
the world.
Korea to completely implode as a country, and then all of a sudden have millions of North Korean refugees coming into China.
Yeah.
Exactly,
So,
which is what my question is. When they see this ramping up, might they want to, for their own sake, get more involved?
right. I think I believe that the Chinese are getting serious when they start to cut off the crude oil imports.
Oil.
Yeah.
Right.
Right now,
I
they
believe
only
90%.
stop coal.
Right.
They're stopping coal, but not oil.
About 90%, I believe, of North Korea's imports in crude oil come from China. When China starts to cut off that oil, then I know that they're getting serious.
Not only that, a lot of the actual material used for some of these missiles is also coming straight from China. Yeah. They are literally enablers in the purest sense of the term. So I wonder, Brian, where the how do we incentivize or the world incentivize China?
Very simple. The South China Sea, they want to dominate. But guess what? Not only don't we want to let them do that, we have a reason to be there. Yeah. Because we have a belligerent neighbor to their south. So we want to see, we have to have a military presence. And you know what? We're also responsible for Japan and South Korea. So I'm going to have to put the THAAD missile system there. That drives them crazy. Yeah. I'm going to have to put additional destroyers in the region. That'll drive them crazy. Yeah. I'm going to have to perhaps put defensive nuclear weapons into Japan. That will drive everybody crazy. Yeah. Then you'll act.
Yeah. You can't. I think we could all agree, this doesn't get done by just strong wording condemnations. It doesn't. You've got to hurt them. You've got to make those leaders. You've got to bleed them. And a big conflagration, I don't want that. I've been fighting wars for 25 years. But we've got to take them down.
But I do want to see how China responds to this as it's amping up, because they don't want war in that area either, most of all.
I just want to challenge the theory that everyone seems to agree on, that it's going to be a disaster if Kim falls. They're already starving to death. Right. They already have no rights. You drop food in there, it'll be the best day they've ever had. 100%. We go in there with the UN and say we have no more guns, we just want to feed you.
Right, but they have been fed propaganda that we're the enemy, that we're the ones trying to go after them, because it's not like here where we have all these different media sources. Kim Jong-un tells them what they think, so they don't think, oh, thank the United States for being here, because they've been brainwashed to think that we're the enemy.
And someone gives you a cracker, I think you're liable to listen.
I suppose so, but it's been a very, very involved, complicated process of indoctrination where they think that they need to be afraid of us, so it's not going to be quite that simple.